Hello everybody, happy Monday. It's Maureen Bangle from the Hair Color Magic team, and we are doing our very last technical Instagram live today. We have one more Wellness Wednesday with my very good friend and teammate Terry Vardy this coming Wednesday, the 27th at 3 p.m. Central Standard Time. So don't forget to tune in because we all need a little bit of wellness these days. So if you could, while everyone's joining in, before we get into the technical part of our Instagram Live, if you could drop where you're watching from, your city and your salon in the comments below. I'd love to see where you are from. And today we are talking about high contrast dimension. So how many of you so far have heard of guests before we left the salons? How many of you had guests that were coming in and maybe asking for the ever dreaded chunky highlights, right? We all hate that word because it brings back bad memories of somebody on American Idol and back to 2004, whatever it was, and all we can think about is white, black, and red hair all together, right? But high contrast dimension is really making a comeback. And since we're heading back into salons, we've been back a week now, I have found that our guests that are coming back are definitely looking for something a little bit different. And it just so happens that high contrast dimension is a great way to introduce them to something different. So I want to share with you a couple different ways that I created some different looks for you and that I'd love to share with you. And they're really, all of the looks that I did 3 different looks for you. I'm going to demo one and we're going to go over the other 2 because they're pretty simple. But the reason I love these looks is because going back into the salon, we're not going to have a whole lot of time, right? Everybody wants to get in, everybody wants their hair done, which is great, but we're not going to have a whole lot of time to switch gears or upsell something, do something a little bit different. But all 3 of these looks were actually done with 5 to maybe 15 foils. So they were all pretty fast and great ways to change up what your guests are looking for. So we know we're used to a lot of balayage, a lot of lived-in color, but again, we have the opportunity right now to change up what our guests are looking for. Why is high contrast dimension a great way to incorporate something new? It's a great way to incorporate something new because we have outgrowth to work with. And when we are doing high contrast dimension, there's one thing that's really, really, really important. And a couple of my teammates have talked about it, and that is negative space. So let's talk about the technique and what we're gonna do. So for our technique, really simple sectioning. I actually took our guest, Erica, and I used her part as one section, ear to ear parting as to separate into my 4 sections I'm used to using. I then did triangle of life, which we call it in Hair Color Magic. And then for her high contrast dimension, actually, I did about 1.5 inches to 2 inches off of her front hairline to about the front of her ear on both sides. Pretty simple, right? So the great part about this look is that it's something we can do on somebody who already is a highlighted guest or a lived-in color guest that we either do hair painting on, true to tone technique, whatever technique you love to use, foliage, teasy lights, whatever you call them. This is a great way to incorporate something new. So what I did for her, I'm going to demo it in a second, but I want to go over this first, and I'll let Vanessa come in a little closer in just a second so you can screenshot this. But all I did was in that section in the front, from her front hairline to basically the round of the head, that 1.5 to 2 inches back, is I left out a very thin veil of hair right along her hairline. I'll show you why. Then I did a back comb, a slice that I back combed, 2 slices, and a slice that I back combed again. So this is meant to be back to back because we want high contrast dimension. We don't want the negative space in between these subsections. We want them to be right next to each other. So I will let Vanessa come in real quick for just a second so you can screenshot the sectioning. Like I said, pretty simple. Wanted to keep it nice and easy for everybody. I'm going to bring Erica in and my tray. And actually on Erica, I am just using conditioner today because I have a finished look already finished for you. So again, we have this section that is about, this is about an inch from your knuckle to your knuckle. So we have about 2 inches back from the hairline. Another way of looking at this would be where that round of the head is. So that's where that's what I use for my partings. I'm going to take a very thin veil of hair out from the hairline. And the reason I like to do this is because when this guest pulls her hair back, I don't, especially with summer coming, right? I don't want to see this high contrast dimension right on her hairline. So the other thing I found was once I have that veil out of the way, I am actually going to take along her side here, just below the point of recession, I am actually going to take that hair and drop it out as well. Again, I just found that I didn't necessarily like seeing that light right along her sides. I like to keep a little bit more depth. So here we go. Again, 2 inches back from the front hairline to the front of the ear, and then I just took out that very, very, very thin veil. Could you, if you wanted to, could you baby light that? Absolutely. Absolutely. So here we go. I'm taking my first slice. I'm going to pick that up. For me, for more control, I'm going to separate this in half just so it's easier for me to work with. So my first subsection, I am going to back comb. And again, the only reason I'm doing this is I just want to create a little bit of diffusion at the scalp for some of these. So I'm going to push that out of the way. And I'm going to apply it on my mannequin that I finished for you all. I did enlightener and 10 volume for her. In this case, like you said, I still want to make it salon friendly. A lot of the looks that you are seeing for this high contrast dimension are very contrasting, so very light and dark. And if that's what you're looking for that particular guest, that is great. But for this guest, I decided to be a little bit more salon friendly. Oops. So there is my first slice. I'm just going to continue to do that in that subsection right next to it. This was the same subsection, just divided in two. So when I'm backcombing this, I really want to make sure that I'm getting close to the scalp because I don't want this to be far away from the scalp. I just want it to be diffused. So push that backcombing out of the way. Here's a little trick for you. You can actually take your comb and tuck that out of your way. Take that out so I can get to the rest of her hair. So again, on my mannequin, I finished for you, that you'll see here in a second, I did 10 volume enlightener or a 10 volume bleach if you're using a different line other than Aveda. So there's my first slice. Now, as I said in my diagram before, the next two are going to be slices. I'm not going to backcomb these. So here's one. Are you guys getting a lot of requests for chunky in the salon. Have you seen it? Have you heard it? Go ahead and write in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. So starting a little bit further off, and then to not create those hot lines at the scalp, you lift that up, lift that foil up so you're holding that hair 90 degrees out from the head. It'll stop you from getting those hot lines. Anybody ever experienced that? It took me forever to figure out what the heck it was until Loopy taught me what we were doing wrong. So I'm going to tuck that in there. So there's my first slice. So the next one is going to be a slice as well. And why I chose to do these two slices together with the backcombing on either end of them was really to create that bold look. So if we're going to do high contrast dimension, we better do high contrast dimension, right? Go big or go home. So I'm going to separate this into two sections as well so I can have more control. Lift that up. And saturate, always rolling that hair back and forth to make sure you have good saturation. And here's the other half of that section. So I also decided to do two variations of this because I think it's always fun. You know, I don't know about you guys, but I don't have all long blondes in the salon as guests. I have lots of different lengths and shapes, different colors. So I decided to do a couple different ones for you as well. So I will show you those after we get through Erica here. For those of you that are just joining us, welcome. We're doing a high contrast dimension on our lovely guest. So this one, the last one that I'm going to do is going to be backcombing. So I'm going to hold it up. And remember, I want to get that backcombing right down to the new growth. This is just to diffuse that line. And the reason I chose, again, backcombing on this top section was to make sure that the hair, or the last section that lays over the top, is nice and diffused. So it's not that harsh line that we're used to seeing when somebody says that chunky word. So I'm going to finish saturating this, rolling back and forth, and I'm going to ask Vanessa if we have any questions. Everybody doing okay so far?
Everyone's doing good.
All right.
We have Dawn.
Hey, Donzie. All right, so that, like I said, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 foils on that side. So now I'm going to move to her light side, and I'm going to basically do the exact same thing. So I'm going to take out from her recession down. So I want to keep that out of the way. I'm going to leave out that little veil right along her hairline. And on this side, you may find, the light side, you may find that you only get a couple subsections. You may not get all 4. So that's the thing, folks, right? Please make sure that you are customizing it to your guest, the look you're wanting to have. But remember, you know, for me, I think of contrast, and Vanessa, my sister, who's my camera person today, always laughs at me because I always have lots of metaphors. And for me, the metaphor with negative space or contrast is actually a piano keyboard. So if you were to look at piano keys from far away, if they were just white, you probably wouldn't be able to see where they start and stop, right? It'd be more difficult to see where the keys start and stop. But when you put the black keys in with the white, it separates them. And that's negative, for me, that's how I think of negative space, is you can't have all of these highlights packed in close together, close together, close together, without anything contrasting in between. Otherwise, it'll just look very monotone. So I did that first one with backcombing. Second one is a slice. Going ahead and saturating that. And lifting up from 90 to get nice and close. Now, like I said, on the heavy side, we did 2 of those slices back to back before we moved to another backcombing. On this one, you can see I don't have a lot of space left, so I'm actually going to change it up. On this side, I'm going to read what I've got here. And for this last section, I'm just going to backcomb this one. I'm not going to do another slice. So making sure that that backcombing is nice and tight. Remember, this is not meant to be far away from the scalp. It's just to diffuse that line. So once we get this guy in, I'm going to go ahead and show you what our finished product looks like.
Out of curiosity, before you move on to your finished product,
Yep.
what would have been the technique for the Kelly Clarkson? How would it have differed from?
So,
Should I say
so the question was, how does this differ from the Kelly Clarkson, right? The look that everybody is afraid to do again. And I would say back then when we did it, it was multiple slices back to back to back to back to back. So in this case, by adding some backcombing to that new growth area, it's softening that look a little bit. It's not as harsh as it once was. I also am looking to do a video for my YouTube channel that we talk about that particular look. It's another variation of high contrast dimension. But in that one, if you've been in some of my hair color magic classes, we've talked about it. It's my favorite way of doing the Kelly Clarkson is to backcomb, but instead of backcombing all the way to the scalp on all of your pieces, alter how far away you take your backcombing. So if I do 3 sections back to back, actually, Vanessa, I'm going to have you come in real quick because I will demo just the backcombing that I like to do. So if I was going to continue with high contrast dimension, what I would do is I would take, like I said, 3 sections back, 3 slices back to back. This first one, I might backcomb and keep it a little bit more off the scalp. So a few inches off of the scalp, right? I'm going to lay that to the side so you can kind of see this in just a second. My second slice, I might take and I might go a little bit closer to the scalp. I don't know if you can see that on camera, but I'm going to try and make a visual here for you. And the last section, the last slice, I would take that backcombing all the way down to the scalp. So what I like to do is, so this piece, the backcombing or the enlightener would start up here, right? That middle section, it might start here, and that first section, the enlightener starts here. So you can see it's not all that boldness right at the scalp. You still get that bright ribbony piece that runs through the mid-lengths and ends. However, the top, like I said, is more of it blends into that ribbon instead of being so harsh right at the new growth. So that's what I like to do if I'm doing more of that high contrast dimension throughout the head. But today I just wanted to show you just an add-on for something that you're currently doing in the salon. So, are you ready? All right. Here is our Erica. So you can see that area where it's that really bold dimension, that really high contrast in through the top around her face. This would be an example of maybe somebody that had lived in color or grown out highlights in the past, and she came in and, like I said, she wanted to see something a little bit different. How would we work with this as she came back in for future appointments? So we could create a shadow root to kind of blur that line. Some of my teammates have some great videos on Loopy Voss's Instagram on shadow roots. So that's one option. Absolutely, you can hair paint the rest of her hair, but remember, the big important piece here is to have that negative space right behind it, right? So if you don't have this darkness, this piece will not show up as well. So hang on one second, let me grab my brush. And I want to show you what I did, why I left that little veil of color, or of hair, excuse me, out first. So when she pulls her hair back, I don't see that on the sides. That's why I left out that little piece on the sides there. And then as I turn her around, you can see that veil of hair that lays over it still allows that brightness to show through without being super harsh and this flash of color when she pulls her hair back. So that's one little option for you to use, again, in salon when you head back. Like I said, on this one, it's a total of 9 foils on Erica, just to change up where those 9 foils are on the head. Placement makes a difference, right? So our next one, I decided to do something asymmetrical. So again, just talking about placement, throwing some ideas around, what could I do that was different? And so I decided to take our guest from a couple weeks ago. This is Viola. She was our block color model that we did. So she had this beautiful auburny hair and decided why not take, here I'll raise her up a little bit so I can talk about her. I decided to take basically that same sectioning and foil work and put it just on one side. So she has this great pop of color along her curtain fringe and her layered haircut that just allows a little bit of something fun and something interesting without being super complicated. Again, this one, same parting. So I took about 2 inches past the front hairline, and I took slices and I did back comb these because she is also a root retouch. So I just wanted to diffuse that line again close to her scalp. But once we do that, think about when her future appointments come about, what do we have to do? Maybe it's just her regrowth and a gloss over her mid-lengths and ends to make sure it's not raw looking, but just give her something a little bit different. This could last her through a few appointments, right? So just changing it up. And I like to do a little bit of asymmetry every once in a while. So my tip here was use the round of the head for your partings and also read the haircut. So for her, because she had a fringe and because she has those long layers, there were actually a few sections that worked along the side of her head, right? So there were about 3 sections that were 3 to 4 foils, depending upon how dense her hair is. And then, like I said, again, I just took back combing and back combed it all the way down to the scalp to diffuse that line moving forward. But when you pull her hair back as well, if she were to pull her hair up, she might have a little bit of color that you see see if I can grab all her hair. But nothing stripy, nothing too out of the ordinary, nothing too shocking. And last but not least, I had to do a short hair with a fringe, or you can use this for somebody with short hair or a fringe. You can use this one. I decided to do this one with a little bit of a fashion color too. So I'm going to grab her. This is Sarah, and she's got this great kind of bowl cut. And what I did with her is, this is somebody who, let's say, has just an all over great color. It's really pretty. But all I did for Sarah was I took along her part a triangle shaped section that I could get. I think with hers, the other day it was 6 foils total, all back to back. And what I did for Sarah that was a little bit different than these two ladies was, as I moved back from her face, away from her face, what I did in those slices is I got the enlightener to lighten pretty close to the new growth. Then her next foil, I pulled it a little bit further away from her new growth until this last section here, I kept that a little bit further off and actually zigzagged it. So when that last foil falls over the rest of her fringe, there wasn't a harsh line there. I wanted to make sure that the lines were soft. But I love how you can pull this off to one side and get one color. If she pushed it off to the other side, you get a great other look to it. If she cut her fringe a little bit shorter, it would be more of a peekaboo. But in this case, her formula is a 6 GY, 6 full spectrum permanent, but GY green yellow from Full Spectrum Deep. And then what I went over her pre-lightened hair with is 20 grams of emerald and 5 grams of daffodil. So wanted to get a little bit of that nice greeny yellow in a different color category to go with it. But it's a fun look here as well. So any questions so far?
We had a question earlier. So obviously if the part was in the middle,
yeah,
you would mimic both sides versus a side part.
Absolutely. So if your guest part was in the middle, you would keep the middle part and you would do that same sectioning and same slice combination on either side. Yep, absolutely.
And the reason that you did for the short fringe, just is it harder to back comb when hair's that short, so you kind of just feather the enlightener in?
So the question was, for the short fringe, why did I change up my application? Why didn't I back comb? One, you're absolutely right. The hair being a little bit shorter makes it a little bit more difficult to back comb. And I just wanted to shake things up a little bit too. For this one, compared to the other ones, remember on the first one, I am really looking for that high contrast closer to the scalp. For the asymmetrical one, I really want to see it in her wave that she has. And for this particular guest, I wanted to highlight the fringe, and I wanted there to be more of a pop of high contrast versus a long piece that flows over everything. So I wanted there to be a little bit more depth at the scalp versus, let's say, the first one, where I wanted that to be really close to the scalp as well. So it was just a different way of changing up the application and technique, being creative, and just seeing what happened. So, but yeah, I love that green on her. It looks awesome. Anything else? Any other questions? No? All right. If there are any more questions, you guys, I promise to come back and look at them later. I know it is a holiday today, so I'm sure some people are out having fun. They may not see this till later, but I promise to come back and answer any questions. So how do I take these 3 examples and how do I customize them, right? So backcombing versus no backcombing, right? On our first guest, we did backcombing. The reason we wanted to do that is because for her, and the reason for that guest is I wanted that color to be really close to the scalp, without being super harsh. So I made sure that I could back comb close to the scalp just to diffuse that line. On my short-haired guest, I wanted to make sure that I still had some diffusion at the new growth, but for that diffusion, I pulled it further away from the scalp to give that diffusion. Negative space. You guys don't forget about negative space. It's so important with high contrast dimension. If we don't have the negative space, the contrast that we work so hard to put in will not shine the way we want it to. So we want to make sure that we have that negative space. It's really important. Shadow rooting. Shadow roots are a great way for this look. As this grows out and she starts having new growth, when she comes back for subsequent visits, shadow rooting would be a great way. Come on, there we go. Shadow rooting would be a great way to help her grow through that look and keep progressing as time goes on. If you guys want any more information about shadow rootings or contrast shadowing, please check out, I know Dawn Shank, my teammate Dawnzy Pants, is her Instagram handle. She did a great Instagram live on negative space. And Jen Roski did a great Instagram live on shadow rooting. So along with all my other team members, but those two are the ones that are on the top of my head for those two topics. Please check them out on this page on Loopy Voss's Instagram. They are great episodes of Instagram TV to talk about those things a little bit more in depth. Last but not least, how can you customize this for your guest? Placement. So for our first guest, Erica, it was around the face, right? Very much around the front to give that bright look for summer. It's a great option. For Viola, that placement, asymmetrical. Change it up, do something a little bit more fun. Like I said, for Viola, again, right now she's parted down the middle, but what happens if we change her part? What happens if we part on this side? You're not going to see it as much. What happens if we part it on this side? We're going to expose more of that dimension. So it's a great option to do something asymmetrical. And last but not least, Sarah, because she had that fringe and that kind of bowl haircut, I just wanted a little pop of color. And that's why I decided on just that triangle section to give her a little bit of interest, a little bit of contrast, and something that she could have for a little while and decide maybe she doesn't want it anymore, or change the color of that fashion color as well. So, like I said, I really hope you guys have a really fun time heading back into the salon. Remember, all of these looks were done with anywhere from 6 to about 15 foils. So really fast ways to foil and give your guests and you something different to do in the salon. Change it up, do something different, give somebody a different look. If they're not into it right now, my best advice to you is to plant the seed. It might not be this time, but maybe next time or the time after. They'll say, hey, remember when you told me about that? I think it's a great opportunity for us to change and shift from what we're doing into something very new. So if you do any of these looks, I would love to see them, and so would everybody at Hair Color Magic. So if you can tag my Instagram handle, which is behind me, tag at Loopy Voss, and tag at Hair Color Magic. We'd love to see the work that you are doing when you get back to the salon. Don't forget, Terry, do one last Wellness Wednesday to get you set up for going back to the salon. And my last challenge to you is to go back to the salon and be bold. So I look forward to seeing you again soon. You all have a great rest of your afternoon. Take care.
I want to end it.
Yes.